Okay. So, I like that Chris on the outside. So we're going to start off with this question. The first question from the audience is, what future challenges are you looking forward to the most to solve with building information modeling? Let's start with the contractors. And he's going to throw it over to Joachim first. So you guys are producing buildings a lot. And you touched upon timber, which obviously Hampus spoke about as well. What are you most looking forward to solve?
The productivity problem in our industry and sustainability, I would say.
Yep. Because productivity is so low?
Yeah.
Anybody want to jump on that? I mean, Hampus, I think you touched upon easy challenges, coordination, productivity. Of course, lack of coordination drives really poor productivity. So,
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that generally coordination and making it easier to do the right choice. I think a lot of times it's really hard to kind of figure out what the right choice is, because I mean, I see the second question is there's so many parameters. Is it price? Is it climate? Is it delivery time? Is it construction? I mean, internal parameters. So I think that there's definitely a huge opportunity I'm looking forward to see and hear you talk about is just how to help customers do the right choice. Swipe right. I mean, I think we've all tried it with other products. So why isn't there a swipe right for right in BIM? You just like construct the thing and you swipe right and say, just make it better.
Anyone want to pick up on that, Florian? Anything to add on about the productivity issues making it easier?
I would look on the industry side and to help them how to access target groups in the future via BIM.
I mean, and also for that, I mean, you guys are 100% involved in ongoing education, and you explained very, very well, like, things are changing so fast, what you learn today is very different tomorrow. Is it also an education issue, getting people out to understand what choices to make?
Absolutely, because the challenge is you have to not just know it as an opportunity, but understand when to use it and how to use it. And with BIM, there's two directions. You might find something interesting within BIMobject, but then you need to understand it, so a connection to an education course would be helpful to understand what to do with it. But vice versa, you might learn about a new technology through education first, but you have to make it easy for the designer to be able to use that. And that's where the BIMobject, if it's properly put together, makes it very simple to include that in a project.
Okay, great. I'm going to skip to the next question, which is, are we willing to pay a higher price for sustainability as it affects profit margins? I think that's kind of, I would have never have asked that question in that way, who end up will be paying the bill. So I'm going to jump straight over to Hampus from an investment point of view. I mean, the cost of doing these things, what is that?
I think it's a really good question. And I think it's, for me, I think that one of the things I've been very done is how we've been able to brand and communicate about carbon as an emission. Emission is a very passive thing. It's like, we're driving our car and something is emitted. I think that second we convert it to think about pollution, I think it's like when we think about it as pollution, I think we see it very differently. So I would see being non-sustainable is kind of like smoking. It's like a great idea today, but you know you're going to die very early. So I think the price is, it's probably going to be, I believe, if anybody's seen The Expanse. Has anybody seen The Expanse, the movie, TV series? In The Expanse, they're terraforming Mars. And essentially there are two jobs on Mars. One is terraforming Mars. One is being the military, making sure that the Earth doesn't invade. I think in the future, I think 20-30% of the jobs on the planet, there's going to be climate jobs. Just people are going to need to work to making sure that we don't die. So I think that, is there going to be money in this? Oh yeah. I believe it's going to be one of the bigger industries to work in. I mean, there's a discussion that it's I've lost the number now because it's one of those crazy numbers. It's like a $25 trillion investment to convert cities to being green. And that's only looking at the top 30 cities in the world or something. So it's like just like crazy amounts of money being poured into trying to turn this tanker ship so that we don't die. And I think there is a very easy solution. If you don't care about climate, just don't get kids. Not because kids pollute, but then you actually don't have to care. Because nothing's going to happen in 50 years. You're going to be able to die and still go to the Maldives. But your kids are not. It's going to be civil war, it's going to be unrest, it's going to be famine. Even if you're the most right-wing person who really, really hates foreigners, you should definitely work for climate, because there are going to be more foreigners here looking for your jobs and whatever if there's climate.
Very true.
So I would say that it is to the point where there probably won't be people who can't work with climate. It's going to be like it's going to be like asbestos we're in construction. It was like, yeah, there was a time when we didn't think asbestos was such a bad thing. It is.
It is bad.
It is pretty
it's
bad.
still being sorted out today. I mean, we're not going to talk about asbestos, but Fred, I mean, you're making education and films which are being absorbed by millions and millions of people around the world. Like the sustainability question, and you producing around that subject, is that being a higher demand? Are people really wanting to know about this stuff now?
Yeah, I think public perception is definitely shifting. It's shifted massively in the last 12 months. There is a minority of people that you alluded to who are never going to listen, and we do get comments from certain demographic in America who have called me all kinds of things. And we have there's one guy who writes long, abusive paragraphs about me, and we just click delete, and he sort of spent ages writing these things. It's quite rewarding just to delete it straight away. But I think the point about profit margins and money is where this really comes in, and I think the fact that at the moment we're not even making any money in construction, so the ability to look at other things is almost impossible. We're all just trying to survive, and we have these. We're all buying and procuring buildings based on how cheap we can get them for, and we're letting contracts to contractors and project teams where we're trying to say, oh, you want 1.75% profit? It's a bit greedy, isn't it? And what the hell do we expect? We're not investing in our built environment. We're not paying the people that do it properly. We're not putting anything into R&D in this industry, and we're scratching our heads as to why we're not building a more sustainable world. It's I think there's some great things that are going on. There's some good changes that need to happen, but I think we need a fundamental, quite big disruption to this industry to really change things. I think external public opinion is going to be part of that. We need people to procure buildings based on the running costs, whether it's your home or your office or anything else. But until something external changes, I don't think, or we change contract forms in the industry, I don't think we're really going to.
And that we started to speak about that yesterday. And I mean, Vibeke, how much money do you make? No, that's that's not a question. It is actually about, look, you procure and you build buildings. You are, like you said, you spend 70% of your revenue on stuff that we consume and you plow into buildings. Like this is a question very much for you guys. And you guys, obviously, the client is paying. Although you do build some of your own buildings, I believe, as well, for in housing. So how are you guys kind of approaching this kind of challenge on cost?
No, so there is a really huge challenge because it's, as we heard here, it's a really low margin business. And so as soon as you bring up a long-term investment, it's quite hard to get it through. So, but I would say even if we connect it to the next question, is like even the end customer, if we have a private person who are building their homes, we see that they are willing to pay a bit more if it's a sustainable product.
I mean, the digital twin idea, getting the house on your phone as a monitoring full life kind of product, is something that we've seen. We've worked, BIMobject's worked with a couple of companies. In fact, I even did it for when I sold my apartment, I 3D scanned it and then sent that to the estate agent. And the estate agent was really cross, because the estate agent was like, yeah, but I want to produce all my wonderful paper and I want to take people physically around the building because I want to show them how wonderful it is. But it's like, no, I've 3D scanned it. It's all, like, so there's this massive kind of, it's like, well, you don't, they were like, they were really cross with me. It was very, very strange. I mean, this kind of goes back to the education question, right? I mean, these new things coming in is fundamentally changing the way that we work.
But the whole thing is a micro question versus a macro question. If you look at the big picture of the cost of destroying the planet, it's enormous.
Yeah.
And so, yes, if you're looking at is it worth it to pay extra to build a better building, we have to make sure as a society that we make it so it's more expensive to build poorly. Because as a society, it costs us all. And it is an education, but it's not just an education at this level. It's a large-scale education where people think that getting the cheapest building is the best way to make profit. And that's a difficult question. I don't understand personally how people don't see that as a problem.
I think it does cost us all. We need to make that story clearer.
Yes.
We have cheaply built houses that people wake up in every day, they feel uninspired. How are they ever going to go and achieve their best potential if they don't do that? We had a council housing block in London that was built cheaply that burned down and 70 people died. We have buildings that are causing 70% of global CO2 emissions. I mean, what more do people need?
Yeah.
to make that to be told about this stuff. You know, we need to build better buildings. We don't build, we build badly. We've known that for decades, but we still do it.
And we allow it.
I think that for me, I'd love to kind of view it as what if we see CO2 as child labor? Like we say that we just, like a lot of children are building stuff in the economy right now, and we think it's just totally cool. Like, how do we get the margins? Like, how do we increase our margins? Like, one thing is we're doing something which is obviously wrong. We have children building stuff, or whatever you think revolting, child pornography or whatever. Like, take something really revolting and put that as CO2. Like, it's not that we can think about how to increase our margins. We're doing something which is fundamentally wrong. So it's like, and there was a civil war in the US about using slaves or not. Like, before, it's like, hey, come on, a bit of slavery is fine. Afterwards, like, no, please. So I think there's going to be a time when people look back and it's like, do you remember when we like destroyed our planet? That was pretty crazy. I was like, that was totally cool with my grandparents. They were just like, yeah, I mean, burn it, whatever. So it's like, there's going to be a time when it's going to be revolting.
Yeah, it's a good example because people used to say, can we afford to not have slave labor?
Exactly. It's going to be like, I mean, come on, it's going to be so expensive. It's going to be white people having to build stuff. Whoa, they're so expensive. It's like, it's going to be the same thing. It's like, do you remember when you had like coal to do stuff? That's stupid.
I mean, Florian, let's jump over to you. Obviously, in the German market, I mean, though some of us build our own homes, we've got public sector, we've got private sector. This kind of question, the sustainable housing, the push, the big change.
For me, it's a designer. The designer should be, the architect should be a consultant and ask the investor or consult him towards sustainable solutions. I personally had the own experience. I'm building 2 houses right now for me, my family, and I was never asked, you want to use or go for timber? And after a while, I thought about it, sustainable house building, and I said, architect, I would like to go for timber. And he was like, oh, gosh. And he was totally puzzled. And then I went to another construction company taking care of the building erection process. But it was like my education. I was interested in the topic, how to build a sustainable house. I was not asked by the consultant architect. So it's pretty much, it's us.
So we've got us kind of driving, not driving, demanding that the design world kind of go, look, I only want you to design it if it is green. But then the design is one part. Well, then we have obviously the procurement part, which brings us on to our next question, which has come from the live stream. There is, and I know about this, so there is a UK operator in the UK who is looking to start procuring based on the information that it's given. They want information to be able to make better choices, as well as the product itself. So of course they're going to pay for the product, but they also want to pay for the data around the product. Is that a potentially sensible business model and viable moving forward? I mean, who wants to jump into that one first? I'm gonna. Eyes are darting around. No one's jumping on this. I'm gonna throw it to Viveka because you spend loads of money.
All right. I think that I'm a little bit doubtful to this question. Okay. I think that data should be freely available to everyone. Okay. It's sort of like you don't go on Google and find your data and pay for it. It's that's my point of view. I don't know if it's Vedica's. But I mean, it's every new business model that's challenging the industry is positive, and I think that we need initiatives like this to further our industry.
Well, Tess, it's almost like trial and error. I mean, it could be totally catastrophically wrong, but at least we know that it's wrong because at least we have kind of tried it. I mean, what else from? I mean, is the business? Here's a broader question: is the business model for how we pay for construction wrong? Is the way that we fee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And why is that? What is it? Because the way we fee, the way we pay for buildings. What is fundamentally the error? Who wants to jump in and kind of start that ball rolling?
I can go again.
Yeah, of course, keep going.
I mean, it's the way that we charge our customers today. Not us, but like consultants. It's usually by an hourly basis. And I mean, what incentive does that consultant have to be efficient or productive? Nothing. They want to be counterproductive because they want to make more money, bill more hours. So I think that's one of the huge hindrances in our industry. So I think we should look to more common incentives, like common economic incentives for the different players in a construction process. Yep. So that's
totally agree. I mean, also we touched upon it. We had in the debate yesterday. We were talking about this about thinking about paying for buildings based on total cost of ownership So thinking about procuring a building at over 50 years. I mean, Copenhagen are kind of looking at that. And I know, that you've been doing a lot of work in the UK on the new Crossrail project and the huge capital expenditure. Are you starting to see that a lot more in the research that you're doing?
There's definitely a desire, I think, to look at these approaches where we do buy for the lifetime rather than just looking at the capital costs. But there is a deep-rooted cultural issue with the way human beings buy buildings. We want to buy them on the capital costs and get that as cheap as we can. For the vast majority of the global population, we don't look at the life cycle. We don't look at investing in the long term. There's a whole host of reasons for that. We don't want standardized buildings. Everyone wants buildings that feel unique and are special and have a degree of architectural flair in them. And there are solutions to that. You know, there's forms of modular off-site construction where you have panelized construction, so you get the abilities of mass customization and standardization. You get the efficiency with the adaptability that's needed for all the different types of sites and architectural whims that we have in the construction industry. So there are solutions around it, but I think we need quite a big shift in how people see and procure buildings. I mean, Crossrail is a great example. You brought it up. That started at 15 billion pounds in the UK, then it was cut to 14, and now it's like 2 billion over the original budget, and everyone's saying it's 18 billion pounds, it's over budget and it's late. But ultimately, that project's going to add an estimated 42 billion pounds to the UK economy. That's never spoken about.
Yeah.
It's shifting focus is going to be a huge thing. I think lots of things around, going back to the previous question, encouraging behavioural change and educating people about just how much our buildings touch us, I think is really important. That's kind of some of the stuff we're trying to do. You know, people don't realise that you got here today on infrastructure that this industry built. This conference is enabled by the building we're currently sat in. You wake up in a home. When you're sick, you go to a hospital that looks after you. Your children, we were all educated in a building. You know, these environments shape our world, and we've got to invest in them. It's the most important thing we do on this planet.
I mean,
in
from
my
a
opinion. Sorry.
Bit
ranty there,
correct.
sorry.
No, 100% correct. And that's why I didn't interrupt you, because it was a really good point. I mean, Hampers, like from an investment's point of view and money, you just said that obviously loads of money is being ploughed into this industry. Is it the technology around this industry, or is there just a lot of interest also in just building buildings, that like money invested in the building itself? Is that an investable capital?
I absolutely think. I think there's two kinds of capital. It's like one is the risk willing that wants these type 1 improvements that sort of, they're kind of betting games, like where the world I'm coming from, the world of venture, which is you put in $1 and hope that it's going to be $1,000. If it becomes 2, you actually become pretty pissed off. You want it to be 1,000 or nothing, please. And then there's the other world where, as you're saying, if we're talking about sub 5% margins, then, I mean, like any kind of innovation improvements are amazing. But there's completely different structural capital for that. EIB, the European Investment Bank, now announced, like when I was 6 weeks ago or whatever, that they're setting aside 1 trillion euros, and the majority of that is going to be in the second part. It's not going to be like innovation capital. It's going to be lending to green businesses. It's going to be structural infrastructure. So a lot of it is in shifting. And I think that if we think about who should take the long view, I think at the second time as we start talking about business models, if we want anybody to pay extra, and they will have no incentive to do so in 5 to 10 years. It's very hard for them. I mean, as the question were previously, it's like, how do you fund it? But there are players that think about stuff in a 50 to 500 year perspective. And if you do, you're kind of absurd. If you're a city, if you're a hospital, if you're a school, if you're a country, I mean, like, this is not like a CapEx question. I mean, this bridge or building or hospital, it's going to stand there for quite a long time. And the cost of it burning down, or the cost of us having traffic disorders or anything, is massive. And that's why I think like the few commercial players that are not countries that think very long term, they're the kind of likes that are like the IKEAs of the world, who like, oh, I'm going to design the highway 5 miles north and 5 miles south of an IKEA in Shenzhen or in Shanghai. And they do, because they know if people are 10 minutes late, they might skip IKEA. So like they make shitloads of money on it. So I think that we have to think about who long term makes immense amount of money, and that's usually somebody who invests in quote unquote infrastructure. If I buy a house, I might sell it in 5 years.
So I mean, it is a really good point. It brings us on nicely to the next question. Now, I've been to a conference in the UK where I've debated this and asked this quite heavily, which was we do spend a lot of money actually in construction, in innovation. We should spend a lot more. We have these great things like the hackathons that we do. So we produce all this new really cool stuff. and then we go to build it, and the insurance companies go, you haven't tested it properly, we're not going to insure it. And this happens everywhere, all the time. And like, how do we go about? I mean, do you have kind of a similar issue, Florian, in Germany as well, where insurance companies, you come up with these great ideas, and insurance go, no, I want you to build it in the traditional way, no innovation, please.
Currently, if you try to insure your timber built house, it's kind of hard. It's still not accepted. I mean, it's from the fire protection. It's a tick box. It's easy, but there are no real offers for the insurance companies to foster that and to support it.
So, what do you think the aim and solution? I mean, going back to kind of an education question here as well. Is it education, or is it coordination, or is it both?
It's both.
It's both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Knowledge and coordination.
But it's also a systematic problem in our society. I've seen a lot of very innovative products that can't be used in certain jurisdictions because building code won't allow it. You're saying, well, it's being used in France. Why can't it be used in New York? Well, because it takes a long time for the system, the governments, to adapt to new technology and change, because they're afraid. And the incentives are not there for them, because if they approve something new and there's a massive failure, well, there's terrible political repercussions for that.
I mean, have you guys here in Sweden, do you have the same issues? You want to build something. Have you come across that blocker, or have you overcome it? Do you have examples of where actually you have enriched kind of the people that are paying the insurance companies, the client, going, actually, this is a better thing. You should be doing this.
Not that I heard of.
Not so far.
No.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah.
I mean, Hampus, on your side, is it insurance companies, or should it come out of venture capitalism?
No. I think that you see already that, for example, now after Paradise, California, after the forest fires, now the insurance companies in the U.S. are moving the burden of planning forestry to the power utility companies, like the power line drawing companies. They were previously they were just like free of everything. They could just say, hey. But after you see a couple of transformers explode and you see like complete power outages in San Francisco City, then now the insurers and a lot of the litigators are now saying that you can actually litigate towards a utility company for forest fires. And I can say, that's a very quick-moving companies right now, a sector trying to help utility companies plan forests so that they're at lower risk of forest fires. And there's massive amounts of drone companies and satellite companies now that are. I met a company Friday, that grew from 1 million revenue per year to 18 million in 12 months. Because all the utility companies saying, we need help, this can't happen again. And they don't want to cut more forests. They want to plan the forest to decrease forest fire risks. So I think that there will be crazy amounts of innovation, and then there's also going to be massive amounts of coordination. And I think that if in the future there's going to be a different tax codes for buildings that build green or non-green, then I think that if you build a hospital today, you're pretty stupid to build it of old classical cement instead of making it in green cement. And I know the problem with new cement is like, it's a new ISO code. What's the risk? Well, what's the risk? There's a carbon tax, and you're going to get 2% more taxed in the future. I mean, as you said previously, 12 months ago, this was not really a topic. Now, like the last 12 months, people are, thanks, honestly, part to Greta Thunberg, thanks to forest fires in Paradise, California, and thanks to koalas drinking waters out of bikers. Now, everybody in the kitchen sink is thinking, fuck, like what is happening? And like this is something we talked about since the 70s, but now it's primetime TV, except on Fox News. So I think that people are getting aware. There's a massive risk for insurance companies insuring it. And you see banks are now not underwriting coal projects. So if you're a coal company right now, you might not get money in 5 years. And that's why we're going to see fossil fuel stocks plummeting. They're going to plummet in 10 years, not because people don't want coal or oil, because nobody wants to underwrite them. And that's just the financial system doing what it should do.
So kind of bringing that on board, and kind of like from an education point of view, and it ties back in. Actually, there's another question there, which is, should we still be calling it BIM? I don't think it does really matter what it's called. I mean, Emil, you've done a VDC course recently, which is virtual design and construction. Yeah, which is it's something else. Is it about actually having a better area of education on all these subjects that we're talking about now, like?
I think that education, when I was in school, BIM it was on the map, but it was like, that's what we do on the side. I think that it's changing now, and I think that digitalization will be a part of like the curriculum in the schools. And if you talk about VDC, I think that right now it's something that we do in the industry as companies. We educate our people to comply to the VDC framework, as it's so fancily is called. But I think that in the future we will see schools adapting the same framework, and we will teach the same things that they do in Stanford, that Stanford came up with the concept of VDC. So I think that it will be in like 5 years. It would not even be a question. No. You will learn this every day in your schoolwork, and there are educations today that focuses solely on BIM. I think that we have a colleague, or you have a colleague, Magnus, that have like virtualization and BIM.
Yep.
It's a 2-year course. It's perfect. So I think we're a good way there, or a good way on the road. But
there's still a long way to go.
Yes, definitely.
Still a long way. I mean, Fred, you touched on YouTube being trying to be the social network, which is looking at being socially responsible as well, and is obviously having a really tough time. But obviously, it is a way for us to obviously you spread your message, and we spread our message as well. Is that an answer for the future? Because we have someone over on the other end, which I'm going to go to afterwards. We're going to talk about PDFs again. But and both are valid, and it is an interesting.
And it depends what you're trying to achieve. I think both of our approaches are completely valid for what we're trying to achieve. One is more about raising awareness, one is more about the optimum way to educate people, and they both have their place. Coming to the question, I think the big thing we need to do is really in education is get back to the why. So we spend a lot of time on the process, the bureaucracy, and the how and the what, but why are we doing this and why does it matter? If you can get that across to people, whether they're working in the industry now or they're at college or they're at school, suddenly everything else falls into place and makes complete sense to them. And I actually think the BIM acronym's become a bit of its own worst enemy in a way. I think we need to, when you talk about BIM, people now think about 3D modeling and it's expensive and someone over there is going to do it. It doesn't really relate to me. If you talk about using digital tools to make the way we build, operate and live in our buildings better, more efficient, more sustainable, suddenly you get whole rooms of people listening to you, engaged, and everyone understands what you mean. I think getting the language right and pitching this the right way and appealing to people's hearts and explaining to them why it matters cuts through everything else, and then every other part of their learning just completely makes sense after that. So for me, I think that the words we use matter immensely, and the way we pitch stuff matter immensely.
I mean, Stefan, in you're obviously delivering a slightly different type of education and a message, and it's still extremely powerful and extremely useful. I mean, do you feel that the content being produced, there is absolutely a space for both? Is it a generational thing? Is it the way that we're changing through digitization? I mean, how do you guys see it coming through?
As I was saying in my presentation, is different people are looking for different things, and it also depends what you're teaching. I love video. I love to do video courses, but there's two parts. Somebody has to pay for it, and somebody has to be willing to watch it. And when sometimes you get very technical or very micro in what you're teaching, it doesn't make a great video, or it's not really worth it. And you're also dealing with what we do with a whole range. You have people who are experts in an area, and really they don't need the first half. They just want to skip through it. They want to get to the meat and potatoes of the stuff they're getting into the final details. And it's something capitalism is good and bad in different ways. We need regulations to kind of manage that capitalism. So when we create advanced courses, they are popular, but in a much smaller scale. And that's because there's fewer people who are that interested, they want to go in depth. And the people who are paying for the courses then are disappointed. They shouldn't be. But we've talked about this, there's this whole idea of how low can I bring the price, or how much money can I get by spending as little effort and money as possible. And that's not always the right model. And we need regulations to kind of push that. The regulatory framework for education, the threshold is way too low. But we have to play in that field.
I mean, Florian, coming over to you, and Fred touched upon it just a moment ago. BIM is kind of, as a word, in some cases, has become its worst own acronym.
It's spoiled in a way, But actually, however we want, maybe we should do a poll how we should call it in the future. I think it's about the sustainable value chain. That's actually what we are talking about. And here we are talking about a digital aspect of it, digital enabler of the sustainable value chain. And I think for me, yeah, you're absolutely right when you say like the term BIM is old-fashioned. It has some touchy. People are still asking, what do you mean with BIM? Is it 3D? Is it more or less? It's important to explain what it is actually. That it's not just 3D modeling. It's a whole value chain till the end of the building in a couple of 100 years.
So it still has its value, and it still has its value. I mean, the name is
my
really
personal
important.
opinion is name it however you want to, but like understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think BIM is your company, the BIM B1M. So you make a small adoption to it, and maybe that's the way to go. And
With 2 jump-ins, who wants to go first?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate on the abbreviations like VDC in Veidekke has been something like VDC. Something in some projects, because I think that I don't know what this is. I don't want to do this. It's digitalization. I'm not familiar with it. But once you rename it and say like, oh yeah, we're gonna work with the goal-oriented object or project objectives and client objectives and see how we can break those down into stuff that we actually do in the project. Mm-hmm. That's VDC. But if you talk about it in another direction, they're more positive. So I think those acronyms are getting more stigmatized, but it's the things that we do. It doesn't have to have an acronym. It doesn't have to be called BIM or VDC. It's what we do that matters.
I would say, coming from the complete outside, I actually, honestly, a couple of months ago, I didn't know that BIM meant something. I thought the company BIMobject was, I didn't realize that BIM stood for something. So that's like how complete blank I am. But I would say that I think the name, I think that when I sort of researched searches before this and listening to you, I think that the crazy thing is we don't realize that technology was everything that was innovated after we were born. Like if it's before that, it's a given. It's like nobody think about it. Calculators used to be mainly female workers sitting and doing manual work to figure out what stuff were worth and stuff like that. And then calculator became machine, and now calculator is an app on your phone that nobody really opens. So it's like the word, that I totally agree. I think we have to fill the word with a meaning. Like if we say we're BIM, I think the problem is that it's up for interpretation. And I think more importantly, BIM is a means to an end. I think, as you said, I think the more important is to talk about the end. I think it would be absurd to say, oh, we're constructing stuff, but we don't actually have any building information management. People will be like, what, sorry? Isn't building information management kind of core of building? No, we're doing this project like as we did in the old days. It's like, it sounds absurd, right? So I think it's going to be like water. We don't think about it. We take it for given. I don't think it matters what we call it, but I think we have to explain what it is, and we have to turn it into a goal-oriented thing and not a means to an end.
I mean, and I would totally agree, because I saw a conference, I think it was last year, and it was the hashtag was BIMness as usual. It's like business as usual, BIMness as usual. It's making like it is an everyday thing. I mean, I suppose when CAD was first introduced in like the late 80s, people were freaking out, going, "Oh, how can you go from a drawing board where you're so free to design something to a computer program which is quite static?" And but now, because CAD is so old, so we don't even think about it. It is a standard process.
We almost need to, picking up on the point, we need to realise that how absurd this sounds to people outside the industry. I mean, I've spoken to friends and they've said, so what is this BIM thing? You tell me what it's about. It's this new way of working. We bring all the information about a project into one place that everyone can access, and we check that a building's going to work and function correctly before we actually go on site and build it. And they're like, what?
Exactly.
I'm working 60 stories up in a skyscraper and it's built the old way. Like, what the hell do you mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy to the outside world.
Yeah, we can jump.
Yeah, I think that's touching just right at the point in the core of our problem. Because, we're trying to digitalize the process of construction, but it's so great part of the industry or of the parts of the process are still disconnected. So we're trying to put in bits and pieces of new technology and new digitalization parts, but still the processes in the way we're working and the way we procure and we do the projects, and the business models around that are still the same way as 100 years ago. And getting those two together doesn't go very well.
No.
I know, and we've been trying. We've been seeing this 20 years ago. There was lots of ideas for BIM was coming out, and the whole supply chain was supposed to be digitized and work, but it never happened. And people invested and then backed out of it. There seems to be a difficulty at the very end to really get that investment and to get the education. BIM is a very open standard, which is good and bad, but it means that most BIM objects that we've ever seen is just a 3D model. And everybody says, I have a BIM object, but that shouldn't be acceptable. Just a 3D model is not enough. There's a lot more information missing.
So, I mean, that being business as usual, I mean, talking about, again, going back to kind of consumption and education, we'll skip on to the next question. And the two are kind of the same, which is talking about, you talked about wood construction, and obviously, it's carbon bricks, basically, that you're just using. I mean, is there a risk of, if we switch quickly to one material, is that really the answer to move everything to wood, or is it a mixture? We have other materials as well, such as green concrete, and steel has a long...
Steel has a massive carbon footprint as well.
Yeah,
both steel and cement are pretty super shitty. They're like the third nations in the world on carbon. So they're pretty bad. I would say the thing is that what most people don't realize, like when people look at the Amazons and saying, oh, they're burning the Amazons, or they're cutting down the Amazons, everybody believes they're cutting it down to make, paper mass or use the tip. No, they're not. They don't fucking care about the wood. They want livestock. So if we would take and cut down timber and use it for something, that's a massive improvement. So the crazy thing is there's no lack of wood. There's lack of using that wood for something, which is not burning it. And that's just the absurdity of thinking about it. This actually, if you go back to the slave labor analogy, is having slaves working for something we don't use. It's like just so completely bananas. It's like, I can't understand how slashing and burning forests could be a good idea. And it is only because you want lots of cattle. That's the only reason you want to do it. So I think there's no lack of wood. There's plenty of it. And if we just use it instead.
So again, but that goes back to the smart choice, doesn't it? It is about people knowing the right choices
Absolutely.
to make and getting the right investments.
It's interesting because, I mean, as you said about getting insured, it's like the interesting thing is in the US, the insurance companies are slightly starting to get this. In the West Coast, the big danger of climate is forest fires. On the East Coast, it's storms. So if you're building a building in the East Coast, they'd love it to do it with timber. That's a great idea. If you do it on the West Coast, they prefer not to. So, but also the interesting thing is wood burns, like this now is like the ironic me here, but wood burns actually more predictable than cement. So it's actually, for your insurance company, you actually prefer wood buildings because you can actually predict how they burn. Whereas cement buildings, they're extremely unpredictable. So you don't realize, they take longer time to catch fire, but when they actually start burning, it gets a lot worse. So the thing is, like, so many people just don't read below the headline. They don't go, I don't want a wood building because it's bad for the environment. It's like, can you please read the whole article? Can you read the whole PDF, please? Can you watch the whole video?
The education thing is huge. We've done a lot of stuff on cross-laminated timber and timber buildings and sustainable timber and all the rest of it. And without exception, we have pre-scripted responses, I'm ashamed to say. Yeah. But without exception, it's always, cutting down more forests. Always be great fun till it burns. Hope you like your house hot. And we always just have this. They haven't even watched the video. We always put in the bit about fire and char times, predictable char times, and sustainable foresting, all the rest of it. But there are some people who just don't get it, and yet there's a long way to go on educating people around timber. And you can see where people come from. Timber burns.
Absolutely. Yeah. The thing is, we know how to burn timber. Like we, as in, like we can put stuff in a stove. We can, like I've never can burn cement. Well, I can tell you, a big forest fire can burn cement as hell. So the thing is, that's why it's called CLT, right? Cross-laminated timber. Like the reason people use like CLT is people go, oh, CLT, that sounds smart. Like you could just say wood. But like then people go like, oh, wood, I don't like wood. No, but let's use CLT. So like that's why BIM or CLT is a good thing, because some people just embrace it. They're like, that sounds good. So I think we just got to brand wood better. It's got a bad rep.
Florian?
But that again is education, information of investor, of private and commercial investors to tell about it.
And but also, I mean, we touched upon, you guys touched upon the new standards coming out in 22. I'm glad I didn't do a quiz question on that. I've definitely got that wrong. With these new standards again, and is it kind of the theme today? Us discussing, we're going to wrap up soon. Is very much similar to the theme yesterday: education, information. Those are the two major ones. And for Vdeca being a very educated organisation, is it now you just want the information about products so you can just make the right choices? Is that the... It's probably not your biggest problem on a day-to-day basis, but it is still a huge issue.
I mean, it's a big issue because without that information, we cannot do automation, we cannot do analysis, we cannot do predictive maintenance on our buildings. We can't do anything like that. So the product data needs to be in there and readily available for us in order for us to change the building process, be able to transform the building process. Because if we go about, like we said, the same way that we always done, it's just gonna end up in the same place. It's like if you try the same thing twice, don't expect another result.
No.
So yeah, we need to change the process, and having product data available and at your fingertips is a big issue, or not having it is a big issue.
I mean, from an idea from an investment point of view as well, going back and forth, back to insurance very, very quickly. If a company was going, oh, we've got this great new process, here's all the products that we're going to put in the building. We've done all of the modelling for it. The life cycle modelling is done. The total cost of ownership is done. As investment groups, you're like, surely that is a much, much better...
I think if there's something investors likes, it's information. So it's like, it's very clear. Like, the more data, the better. It's always better. There can't be. And the thing is, and this is also a very generational thing, as we talked about. Like, the thing is, as long as Jan Ole or whoever is the construction person at the end, as long as they say, I've never done this before, yeah, it's not going to be changed. But the good thing is, like, that's one of the good things about humanity. They die, and then the stuff change. So it's like it's like what they be university professors. Like, research changed one university professor tenure funeral at a time.
We like usually say retirement, but
yeah, exactly. True. Sorry. That's politically correct. That's good.
All right. Well, look. On that note, and on ending importance about information and education, thank you very much for the panel. Thank you very much for your questions. A big round of applause again for the panel. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.